Hey everybody, this is the dog food recipe calculator that I have created. There's a long story behind how all of this came about. That's going to be for another video. I've talked to a lot of people about this, but I just wanted to dive in and start sharing this. Where I'm at is not at the point of perfection, but it is very usable, and I'll do my best to explain what I have and some of the journey that has got us to where we're at with this calculator. So this calculator is basically a Google Sheet spreadsheet, and it'll allow you to be in full control of your dog's dietary needs and understand what nutrition it's actually getting and where it's getting it from, and all of the ingredients are completely up to you on how you want to utilize this. So in this spreadsheet calculator, there is just the first page. I'm going to kind of hover my mouse around this little tab at the bottom left. It just says thank you. This has some information on it. And then the second tab over provides the recipe comparisons. This is part of the journey on how I got to where I am with this system. Is I bought a bunch of recipes for creating my own dog food using raw whole ingredients, and I was not super excited about some of the ingredients that they were using and how available they were for me, but it did provide me a lot of information. So basically this tab is the output of what those recipes provided. It basically said recipe number 8 that I purchased had this kind of nutrient profile. So this blue column right here of recipe number 8 for beef provided this kind of nutrient profile in these ingredients, and that gave me a basis for what I wanted in comparing what I'm going to be feeding my dogs. And so I got these recipes. I got this beef recipe, a couple of them. Actually, it was number 8 and number 21 of this recipe. Then number 4 of the chicken, number 11 of the turkey, the bison recipe. And basically, I took all of the profiles for those recipes. I compared them to each other. And in this white column in the middle here, I used those profiles, and I said, hey, I'm just going to use sodium, for example. If you took an average of what the sodium level was for each of those recipes, it was 0.62 grams. And if you said, okay, what was the high, what was the low, then this gave me the range of what the high and the low was, and then the 0.62 grams. And so down here in sodium, that's just a little example. So it gave me a kind of a third source for comparing my food recipes that I was actually going to be creating myself to compare it to. The other recipes that are on here, the next 2 recipes were puppy recipes, and the profiles that I bought, or the recipes that I bought for those profiles, gave me these kinds of ingredients, gave me these kind of nutrient profiles in those recipes. And so the yellow column, the big yellow column, there's 3 of them. These are the canine nutrition requirements that were extrapolated from the Merck Vet Manual, and there is a link to that right here in the top left corner, and gave us kind of an outline of what they recommend for canines for a puppy or an adult, what the minimum recommendations are that they needed to meet, and also what the maximum, if a particular mineral or vitamin or nutrient has the possibility of becoming toxic for a dog if they receive too much, then they also provided the maximum amount that would be detrimental to your dog if they receive that over a long period of time. So the minimum is where they set the threshold that if your dog gets less than this, they're going to become deficient in that category. And then this maximum is what the Merck Vet Manual said your dog could have a toxic reaction and start affecting their overall health if they exceed these maximum levels. So that is the tab number 2 here at the bottom of the recipe comparisons, and that provides a great source for going back and forth as you create your own recipes. So the real value of what I've put together here is in tab number 3 and 4. And this first tab has the spreadsheet. This is basically all of the ingredients we've used for our dogs over time. And basically we said, okay, if we're going to use this ingredient for our dogs, how much nutrition is in that ingredient? So basically what we did is we said, if we had 100 grams of ground beef, if we had 100 grams of beef liver, or if we had 100 grams of chicken liver. And if you're not super familiar with grams, about 100 grams is just a little bit under a quarter pound of something. So basically I said I want to be able to compare every ingredient side by side. If I had an equal proportion of those ingredients, 100 grams of them all, what nutrition is in each of these ingredients. So I could say if my recipe seemed to be low in magnesium, let's use that one as an example. It's row number 18 here at the on the left column. Then magnesium is you're shooting here in column B. The average of the recipes is 0.25 grams. Milligrams, and if milligrams per calorie, that is. And so if you're wanting to find a food that happens to be high in magnesium, then if you feel like you're deficient in that category, then you could come across here and say, gosh, which ingredients are high in magnesium? I need to add that to my recipe to offset anything else that I'm using and what's low in it. And so you can kind of compare and just say, hey, look at that. Ground beef has 15 milligrams of magnesium in it. And as you go across here, you can say, oh, wow, hemp seed has 700 milligrams of magnesium in it. And then you can go across a little bit farther and say, oh, my goodness, look at that. Ground eggshells have 2,400 milligrams of magnesium in it. So eggshells happen to be a gold mine for magnesium in recipes for dog food. And so that's what this page is all about. You can basically add any ingredient you want. You can just take out any of these that you decide you're never going to use and write in your own. For instance, I'll probably go in here and say maybe I'm never going to use mushrooms. And so I'm just going to say I'm never going to use that, but I want to use bananas as a treat for my dog. And so I can come in here and say I want to use bananas. And from there, now you have to update this column for bananas. And so what you would do from there is go to checkyourfood.com. And let's pull that up here. So you could go into checkyourfood.com. I read. Continue. And then go to banana. Okay, so once you're in checkyourfood.com, once you've logged into it, then you can again search your ingredient, which is banana, and again go back to the portion size, change it to 100 grams, change the size, update it, and that's all down here right in this little area. So this is how I determined the nutrient profile of any of the ingredients that we're going to be using, and this tells you all about it. So on here, this tells you the sugars, carbohydrates, fibers, proteins, fats. This tells you all of your vitamins, all of your minerals, and down here all of your amino acids and fatty acids, which are incredibly important to pay attention to when it comes to the health of your dog, and lots of allergies that may be going on. Amino acids have a huge role in the overall health of your dog and how they respond to a lot of the foods that they eat. So this is how I came up with this spreadsheet. Is I basically said, hey, this is chicken liver. I went to checkyourfoods.com and found out how much of each ingredient had in all of these categories for minerals, vitamins, and down lower the amino acids. So this is where you can basically alter this spreadsheet to meet the needs. If you have an ingredient you want to add, just take one of these off and add your own and do your own research and figure out the nutrient profile for that ingredient, add it here, and then just kind of go from there. So across here we have the ingredient number 1 through, if we keep going, we've got 39 ingredients that we've used in the past with our dogs. We're not using all of those all simultaneously, but when we want to update anything and figure out what we're doing with our dogs and their health, then we can figure that out. So once you have the nutrient profiles all populated, then you can come over here in your actual calculator and say, okay, of these ingredients 1 through 39 across here, you can say how much of each ingredient you actually want to be using for your recipe. And in this middle area, I have a little bit of a cost calculator. Most people will probably want to ignore that. You can figure out the exact cost per calorie for your dog food and try to figure that out. And that's probably going to be another video for another day. I'm just going to show you how to make your recipes. So basically this big green cell up here in the top left says only modify the cell that's highlighted in green or purple, this cost calculator in this spreadsheet. So this is basically where you're going to say how much of each ingredient you're going to be using in a gram quantity, remembering that you can basically say 450 grams is the same as a pound. So if you want to modify things, you can say how many grams you're going to be using of that. And most of the packages that you'll be using will tell you how many grams are in that package, and you can kind of go from there. So the current recipe that we're using right now, we make a big batch of dog food, and so this reflects the big batch of dog food that we make at a time, and then we store it and freeze it until it's ready to be fed to our dogs. So right now we have ground beef that is, we have 4,500 grams we're using. That's the same as 10 pounds. We used chicken liver, which is also 10 pounds of chicken liver. We have a kelp supplement that we're adding. I could only find the nutrient profile for steamed kelp, so I'm using that. We use a couple of pounds of flaxseed, a couple pounds of chia seed. Coming across here, we use 2 pounds of pumpkin seed. We use 5 dozen eggs. So this particular nutrient profile right here is basically saying we're going to be using 60 eggs. This is the nutrient profile for just a whole raw egg and its shell. And so that's the only one that's not by grams or whatnot. So and then coming across here, we're also using chicken gizzards, 2,250 grams of chicken gizzards. That's about 5 pounds there. You add a little bit of salt, and then we use a lot of chicken with our dog's diet, and this gives you the profile of the thighs and the drumsticks, and this extrapolates out to 27,000 grams, of those. And so we've got it all kind of figured out that we use. With this particular calculator, we've got the meat that we mix up together, and then we feed them the thigh and the drumstick of the chicken leg quarter separate from that. Then we also use some oats in their current recipe as well. And so this is one of those categories where a lot of people there's a lot of controversy around using grains in dog foods, and we've read a lot of different research on that. And at this time, we're comfortable using oats and pearled barley. We're comfortable using rye and millet. And there's a certain way that we prepare that, and I'll share that with you right now. All of the grains or seeds that we use with our dogs, we pre-soak them 24 hours prior to feeding them. That helps them to begin the pre-digestion process that is necessary for a dog's intestine tract to be able to process the oats or any of the grains that they get. And so that's a story for another day. I'm just going to teach you how to use this calculator so you can start using it right away if that's what you choose to do. And you can decide what ingredients you use and what quantities. And so as you go in here and say I'm going to use 2 pounds of flaxseed, this is the total nutrient profile of that 2 pounds and how it's going to be adding up in these categories. And so over here in this gray column, which is kind of in column C, column D of this spreadsheet, there is the actual output of this recipe's nutrient profile. And so it's important that you know that what you're giving your dog is balanced and complete, and it's based off of a per calorie type basis. Your dog is going to need so many calories for its overall body condition. It's going to need to maintain its body condition and stay up to weight, especially Vizslas, which are active. And so it's going to need energy to do that, and that's the calories. And in those calories, the calories need to be complete and balanced. And so this is on a per 1,000 calorie type basis. That's column C. Column D gives you the total of that, and then it also tells you how many calories are total in this recipe per ounce of it. So it's kind of a complex little calculator when you think about how it all comes together, but as far as using it, it can be understood. It might take you a few times of looking at things to try to digest this all, no pun intended, in your own head to be able to say, okay, this is what this thing's actually doing. This is where I want to go with it. So in this particular recipe that we're using, this is how many grams of fat per 1,000 calories. This is how many omega-3s, omega-6s. This is how much calcium and phosphorus is in there. And so this column C is what I pay really close attention to as I'm creating my recipes. This tells me this is what all of those ingredients are adding up to. And when I want to say, is this recipe good? Is it good enough? Is it lacking anything? Over here, this yellow column again kind of matches up with that other yellow column of that other spreadsheet, and it says here is the nutritional elements that were in the recipes that I bought, and then these are the nutritional requirements, the NRC adult minimum of those, and then here is the column for the average of the bought recipes that I had. So as I go through here and I say, okay, here's how much calcium I have, and here's how much phosphorus I have, is that enough? And so of the bought recipes that I had, they were averaging between 2,200 and 1,400 milligrams of calcium, and so compared to mine is in about that 850 milligrams category, and so I'm a little bit lower than the average of the bought recipes, but I am significantly higher than the minimum of the NRC requirements for canines, which is 500 milligrams. So after I'm done with the recipe, I scroll across and I bypass all of the ingredients that I'm using, and I just look at how I'm comparing to this yellow column. I scroll it over, I compare it to this yellow column, and I say, okay, here's where I'm at with my calories. Up here I'm averaging about 40 calories per ounce, and the average of the other recipes, they were between 36 and 46, so I'm kind of right there in the middle. And then I go through here and I say, okay, here's where I'm at with iron and copper and manganese and zinc, and I just say, am I high or low in any of these categories? What do I need to improve on? What am I too high on? What do I need to adjust up or down on my ingredients? And I can do that. So this is an overview of just the recipe calculator and how it works, and I appreciate you guys looking at this, and I'll be doing more little recipe tutorials later to go in depth about each one of these little things. This is just kind of a big overview of where this is at, and appreciate you taking the time to take a look at it.